Welcome back to Ludus Infinium. First off, I'd like to say I apologize for how long it has taken me to do this lore video, but let's get right into it. Today, we're going to talk about how the Thousand Sons fell to chaos. The Thousand Sons are a traitor legion dedicated to Tzeentch, chaos god of change, sorcery, and subterfuge. But who were they before their fall from grace? What caused said fall? And can any from their legion be redeemed? The Thousand Sons were the 15th Legion of Astartes, recruited from the population of Terra and implanted with the gene seed from their Primarch Magnus the Red. As they were being implemented with the gene seed in the labs on Terra, there was a brief surge of warp storms. After finding this out, Magnus deemed this as an ill omen for his legion. The initial core of Thousand Sons legionnaires, known as the student aspirants, were psychically gifted individuals from the Achaemenid Empire, the 40k equivalent to the Persian Empire. Because the Achaemenid Empire had been under the emperor's rule for almost a century, they had not suffered like other regions brought into compliance after their empire. Among the first recruits into the student aspirants were two brothers, Ozic and Ormuz Ahriman. Once raised, the Emperor tested the mettle of the 15th Legion by using them to suppress the remaining techno-barbarians on Terra. After proving themselves this way, the Emperor honored the 15th Legion by dubbing them the Thousand Sons and giving them their own expeditionary fleet. Approximately 5 years after joining the Great Crusade, the Thousand Sons began to show powerful psychic abilities and began to use them more as a way to mimic their beloved emperor. However, these powers came at a steep cost: the flesh change. Based on current knowledge, my best hypothesis is that due to an overuse of their warp-based powers, it caused an accelerated rate of mutations in their bodies to the point they became what would soon be called chaos spawns. Many of the legionnaires who mutated were confined in stasis pods, in the hope that there was a cure. However, the flesh change had taken its toll and reduced their numbers to dangerous lows. Their search for a cure would eventually bring the Legion and the Emperor to Prospero, where they would be reunited with their Primarch, Magnus the Red. After reuniting the 15th Legion with Magnus, the Emperor departed Prospero, returning to the Great Crusade. After the departure of the Emperor, the flesh change worsened and ran rampant through the Legion. Magnus intervened and in some unknown way temporarily cured the flesh change. Unfortunately, by the time he acted, the Legion's numbers had dropped to approximately 1,000. After having their gene seed stabilized and recruiting fresh members from potentially psychic recruits on Prospero, the Thousand Sons rejoined the Great Crusade. Upon their return, they brought quite a few worlds into compliance, using their psychic abilities. They used said abilities in conjunction with Guile to diplomatically bring the worlds into the Imperium's fold. Their psychic methods, though unquestioned by most in the Imperium at this point, became less effective as they encountered more psychically powerful enemies. The 15th used their abilities to either forcefully bend their enemies to their will or eliminate them completely. As they became more brash with their powers, other legionnaires and some primarchs took notice, and they viewed the Thousand Sons and their abilities with extreme suspicion. One of the most outspoken dissidents against the Thousand Sons was the 6th Legion, the Space Wolves, and their primarch, Leman Russ. There were two events that increased the gap between the 6th and 15th Legions: conflict on the planet Aghorru and an outright war against the planets in the Arc Reach cluster. The planet of Aghorru was brought into compliance by the Thousand Sons in the way most common for them, shrewd diplomacy. An interesting legend among the people of Aghorru, which would be made very important soon, would be that of the Elohim, a race similar sounding to the Eldar, and the Dyathai, a form of Elohim who were corrupted by chaos and imprisoned in an artificial mound that came to be known as the Mountain. Upon further investigation inside the mountain by Magnus, he discovered a network of conduits, possibly, in my opinion, the Eldar Webway, or at least part of the Eldar Webway. While studying this network, Magnus discovered that the link from Aghuru to the rest of the network was corrupted and sealed. Further meddling with it broke the seal and released the daemons onto Aghuru. The demons possessed multiple titans and proceeded to attack Magnus and his sons. The only way the 15th were able to fend off and eventually defeat the Titans was because Leman Russ sent a contingent of the 5th Great Company to get aid from Magnus and his sons. The Jarl, and excuse me for mispronouncing this name, Amlodai Skarsenson, was an abrasive and demanding person, telling Magnus that the sons would help the 6th. As a result of his gruff nature, Magnus continued to put off the Jarl until he and his contingent helped with the Titans. The 1,000 Sons made way to the Ark Reach cluster after their victory to the Wolves' aid, and the Wordbearers who were there as well. Even though the 1,000 Sons were an important part of the campaign, it all came to a near disastrous end. Magnus and the 15th had serious problems with the Wolves' near genocidal tactics, while Russ and his Space Wolves claimed it was because the natives did not want to adhere to the Imperial truth. While the Space Wolves butchered their enemies, the Word-Bearers burned out the buildings with purging holy fire. After the battle, tensions flared with no release in sight. Some of the Space Wolves charged the 1,000 Sons alongside their Fenrisian wolves. The battle sorcerers of the 1,000 Sons defended themselves using their psychic abilities, killing many Fenrisian wolves and incapacitating the Space Wolf legionnaires as well. In the midst of the fighting, things only got worse. A 1,000 Son by the name of Hastar became afflicted with the flesh change. Noticing a change in the area, Magnus rushed over to see the disturbance. When he noticed, he held out his arms for a merciful embrace towards Hastar. However, he would never feel his son's embrace again. As he reached, Hastar exploded at Magnus. Enraged, Magnus looked around to see what had just happened. Silence had befallen the immediate area as his eyes met those of the culprit, his brother, Leman Russ, and the spent casing at his feet. Russ stalked up to his brother aggressively. When all thought outright war would break out between the brothers, fortune smiled down upon them, and Lorgar, Primarch of the Word-Bearers, intervened, trying to calm down both of his brothers. Disgusted by his brother's actions, Magnus said he would not sit there and watch this genocide play out, and turned to leave. Russ said it wasn't any of Magnus's business how he and his legion brought worlds into compliance. After taking a few steps, Russ turned back towards Magnus and cut his hand, swearing a blood oath that not only was this fight not over, but that a resolution would soon be coming. After many rumors spread about the 1,000 Sons and their Primarch, the Emperor decided enough was enough. The Emperor called representatives from all legions to the volcanic planet of Nikaea to pass judgment on what would happen to the librarians of the legions. At the Council of Nikaea, all 18 legions were represented, along with 7 Primarchs. The Emperor heard arguments for the pros and cons of keeping librarians in the legions. It was a split of 10 to 7, 10 for and 7 against. Those 4 were the Dark Angels, Emperor's Children, White Scars, Night Lords, Blood Angels, Ultramarines, 1,000 Sons, Word-Bearers, Salamanders, and Alpha Legion. Those against were the Iron Warriors, Space Wolves, Imperial Fists, Iron Hands, World Eaters, Death Guard, and Raven Guard, with the Sons of Horus representative neither for nor against the Librarians. The split of Primarchs was even closer, with 3 for and 4 against. The Primarch's pro-librarian were Sanguinius, Fulgrim, and Magnus. The four against were Mortarion, Rogel Dorn, Corvus Corax, and of course, Leman Russ. Hearing the arguments from both sides, the Emperor made his decision. No one shall be punished for past usage. However, all future uses of sorcery will be forbidden and punished. The results of the council would soon bite the Thousand Sons and their Primarch harder than anything else had up to this point. Because of their arrogance and the belief they knew best, the Thousand Sons gathered sacred and forbidden texts in secret. Through these and other sorcerous means, Magnus discovered that Horus had been corrupted and had turned against their father. Fearing time was short, Magnus used his abilities to cyclically link his mind to his father's mind. Doing this, broke through the palace's defenses and killed thousands. When presented with Magnus's vision, the emperor could not believe that Horus, his most favored son, could turn against him. Instead, the emperor believed that Magnus was the one who had fallen to chaos. In response to this, he sent Leman Russ to capture Magnus and return him to the emperor on Terra for punishment. However, Fate, or Tzeentch, had different plans for the Thousand Sons. Horus had intercepted Leman Russ and told him that the Emperor had changed his mind and that Magnus had earned a more severe punishment. Knowing the damage he had done and what was to come, Magnus resigned himself and his legion to their fate at the hands of the Space Wolves. Knowing all of this, Magnus put a psychic veil over Prospero so no one would know that the Space Wolves had arrived. When they did arrive, they let loose an orbital bombardment onto the planet. The bombardment destroyed everything save Tisca, the capital of Prospero, only because a shield was constantly erected by one of the Thousand Sons' cults. Magnus did not bring down this barrier, so it would not raise any alarms. Because Tisca was protected from the bombardment, it forced a ground invasion from the force consisting of Space Wolves, Adeptus Custodes, and Sisters of Silence, which were effectively blanks or anti-sorcerers in the 40k universe. The force was relentless in its siege, however. The Thousand Sons were not willing to be killed or to let their city fall, so they fought back hard. However, no matter how hard they fought, they were eventually pushed back to the last pyramid of Tisca. Seeing his sons fighting so hard, Magnus finally decided to join the fight. As he did, Russ made his way to Magnus to have a duel that could only be described as a duel of gods. Blade met blade. Psychic fire and lightning was let loose among and around the duelists. Magnus, finally seeing an opening, pierced Russ with a psychic blade through one of his hearts. Russ's two wolves, seeing their master in danger, ran to attack Magnus. Magnus punched down, crushing the skull of one, and used his psychic powers to throw the other over the now watching armies. Russ, finding a better opening, slashed with his sword, scoring a hit on Magnus's lone eye, staggering him. As Magnus was reeling from the attack, Russ grabbed him, lifted him above his head, and let out an almighty roar, bringing Magnus down on his knee, breaking his back. Laying there, broken and battered, Magnus looked around and saw his favored son, Isaac Ahriman, and reached out to him. Ahriman, instinctively knowing, reached for the glowing scarab on his chest, and had other Thousand Sons legionnaires do the same. At that moment, Magnus gave his mortal body transport his sons to safety on the planet of the sorcerers in the warp, finally giving in to chaos to save his sons. And that was my Thousand Sons video part 1. I will do another video on what happens to the Thousand Sons after they get teleported to the planet of the sorcerers. Right now, I want to take a minute and give my opinion on the questions I answered at the beginning of the video on whether they can be redeemed or not. I think that up until that point, Magnus and the Thousand Sons were doing everything in their power to prove how loyal they were. They were forced into chaos. And really because it was all part of a plan. And I hate how they are perceived as like these extremely bad characters now or bad people now when they fought every chance for their lives, for their freedom, for everything, for them only to be now one of the bad guys. It's one of the reasons why they're my favorite Legion. It's one of the reasons why my persona is from an offshoot of the Thousand Sons. I think out of all the traitor legions, if any of them were to go back to being loyalists, I would love to see it be a loyal Magnus and a loyal Thousand Sons, because I believe it's possible. I do. I don't think it will happen, but I think it is possible. That being said, this has been Ludus Infinium. Thank you for bearing with me. I do apologize again for the long wait, and I will see you tomorrow.